listen to me now, light it up and take a what? Yeah, so that's just my shimmy song. I know it has nothing to do with actually shimmying, but this is a dress I've had going on 10 years, if not more, and I love it as much today as I did then. It's kind of flapperish in a non-flapperish way. But anyways, I'm sure we all have clothes that we love to death, which is why I don't know why I'm wearing it for this book review, because you'll find out. Today's book is Sweet Little Lies by Lauren Conrad. And if you saw the first book in this series, the review I did on the first book, LA Candy, you know I'm pretty ambivalent about it. It wasn't the first time that I tried to read it, and so I wasn't really expecting much from it. Like, honestly, why do I read certain books, especially when I know what's gonna happen? But what I had to do is almost disconnect myself from my reader side, because if you focus on the story, if you focus on the background, then you can get past a lot of faults. This book, there's nothing to get past. The plot was bad. The writing was bad. It was incredibly cliche. And the thing is, I don't believe that Lauren Conrad wrote these books. I think she had a hand in it, that she gave details, that maybe she had ideas that she chipped in, but the actual execution was not her. Disagree with me if you want. Writing is hard, and I don't think that's her strong suit. Not to say that she's unintelligent, not that she couldn't have tried it. I just don't think it was in her wheelhouse. With that in mind, her ghostwriter should have done better. This is the kind of writing that I would expect from somebody who does not know how to write. If you're unfamiliar with the series, let me hop into it. Revolving around a young woman, a 19-year-old named Jane Roberts, who finds herself on reality television. Conrad is writing what she knows, and that is what helps the series, or at least these first two books, slide by. Although this one, honestly, I don't think it made it through the door. It picks off where the last one left off. If you know anything about Lauren Conrad, if you know anything about The Hills, you know there was a huge sex tape scandal, and that is mirrored here, where Jane has risqué pictures leaked to the media. That's the end of LA Candy. The beginning of Sweet Little Lies finds her in Mexico with one of her co-stars, Madison. She is hiding out because she is so embarrassed. Like, on the show, she is the good girl. She is America's sweetheart, and now her reputation has been tarnished. Not only because these are risque photos, but because they are photos of her with someone who is not her boyfriend. In fact, it's made worse because it's her boyfriend's best friend, Braden. She's hiding out with Madison, and Madison is the bad girl of the show. Madison is the fame seeker. She is the character who hates Jane because Jane is the star of the show and she wants to be the star. And so she is the one who leaked the photos. She orchestrated a plan to get the pictures, so none of this was happenstance. She wanted to get in the gossip rags. She wanted information about her. She wanted people to read about her. Sweet Little Lies. Jane is recovering and Madison is pretending to be her best friend, when in reality she's still setting up ways for the paparazzi to get shots of Jane. Jane runs back to California, back to her home. She has been ignoring everyone. Scarlett, Jesse, Braden, her parents, Trevor, anybody who is trying to get in touch with her. She shows up back home. She has a quiet Christmas with her family. And then she returns to LA, and it's kind of like time to face the music, time to get back in front of cameras. That's honestly the best I can give you, because as I said, there's no plot in this book. This book is so slow. There's so much you think that can be developed. The Brayden storyline, the Madison storyline, Scarlet, there's so much that can happen in this book that just doesn't. As soon as Jane gets back to LA, gets back to the apartment she shares with Scarlet, who has not been able to get hold of Jane and tell her the truth, because at the end of the last book, she learned that it was not Jesse. So Madison had tried to make it seem like it was Jane's boyfriend, Jesse, who leaked the photos. Scarlet learns it was not Jesse, it was Madison. So yeah, we're like, sweet. Soon as Scarlet talks to Jane, Jane's gonna learn the truth, and then she's gonna turn on Madison and be like, you witch. But Jane refuses to believe Scarlet. Granted, Scarlet hasn't made it easy to be believed, because she likes to talk crap about Madison. She likes to talk crap about Jesse. Like, she's just not a proponent of those two people. So Jane was already a little tired of hearing it. So yeah, I could understand why she didn't really believe it. But then Jesse comes back into her life, and he's like, are you serious? Madison is the one who leaked the photos, and she still refuses to believe it. I think it honestly would have played out better on TV, or maybe it would have played out better if it had been better written. But for all intents and purposes, I would have preferred for Jane to have hopped on board the truth train early on, so that we had this big dynamic with Madison. Instead, it's not till the end of the book when another character is like, look, this is the truth of the matter. Here's the proof that Jane believes any of them. Then the problems that form from that revelation are addressed in the third book. Okay, even if she doesn't believe that Madison is the culprit, I'm expecting more with Jesse, more with Brayden. Because in the first book, Brayden was the love interest. There's all that fun teenagey angst of does he, doesn't he, will we, won't we. It never works out, but this is her crush until she meets Jesse. Jesse's the guy who is man enough to make a move. They start dating, blah, blah, blah. But so I'm thinking, all right, now we can develop Brayden. We can see more of Brayden. But he is a non-entity in this book. This is something I do not understand. Brayden is in LA because he wants to be an actor, but he doesn't like the Hollywood scene. He doesn't like what goes along with becoming or being an actor. It makes no sense to me. And so he has gotten the opportunity to be in a television show. So he leaves California, goes to New York, and he's there for a decent amount of time. And then he shows back up in California because the pilot, the show, did not get off the ground. He and Jesse are coming to fisticuffs. Then he messages Jane to have a lunch. And that's about it. Like, that's all we get. Like, yeah, we get the lunch, but there's nothing about Brayden. Like, maybe he'll get developed in the third book. I've already done a little bit of peek ahead, so I know where they end up. And unless a lot happens between the beginning and the end, somebody needs to be fired. Somebody needs to reconsider their life ambition, because writing is not it. If you know the Hills, Jesse is Jason. Jason apparently had a drug problem, and you can see it reflected in Jesse. So obviously he's based off of a real person, but I think because of that, we are expected to understand a character that's never fully fleshed out because the author knows the character, and that's not necessarily a Lauren Conrad issue. It is, but it isn't. It's a universal issue. Writers know things, or should know, their characters, their story, their world so well. But because they know them so well, they forget to let other people in on the secret. Things get lost in translation, but that's what good editors are for. That's what good beta readers are for. That's what good critique partners are for, to be like, look, we missed something in the character development. But Jesse, he's brought back in pretty early. I guess the whole thing is we're not ever supposed to have much contact with him because he is always drunk or high or messed up or whatever he's on, and because he's really mean when he's drunk and high and all that stuff, he's not worth being around, and so we don't see that. And then this goes back to something that I have an issue with Jane. She is supposed to be a reflection, a representative of Lauren Conrad. So it's interesting, people's polarized views on Lauren Conrad. Some people think she's fantastic. She's the Jane. She's the girl next door that everybody can relate to. But then other people see that as really boring. Like if you watch The Hills, people are like, the real story, the excitement is elsewhere. It's not actually with Elsie. With that in mind, Jane being that girl next door, that innocent, lovable character that everybody can relate to and wants good things to happen for, she's so boring. She's kind of a doormat. She doesn't stick up for herself, and she doesn't want to believe the bad things. And it's just like, Jane, use your brain, like use your common sense. It's like she only wants to see what she wants to see, and therefore she's just not someone that I particularly cared about. I didn't want to read her scenes because she never spoke up for herself. She never made anything happen. And if you've seen my Cruel Prince review, you know how much I hate that in a protagonist. I want the protagonist to be proactive. And Jane just doesn't. Here's a little small thing. Because Scarlett keeps harping on about the fact that she doesn't like Jesse, she doesn't like Madison. Madison is the person who got Jane into this problem in the first place. Jane moves out and she moves in with Madison. While she's living with Madison, she gets a dog. These are little scenes that we get from Madison's perspective. And Madison is like, I hate this dog. I've hated this dog since the moment we set eyes on it, and I just want it out of the apartment. Because here's a bit of a spoiler. Madison has set herself up to be this really wealthy girl. But what we learn is that she just has sugar daddies. They're usually older, they're usually married, and they're usually out of the picture for the most part, but they are the ones who finance her lifestyle. But now this dog is at her apartment with all of her fancy expensive furniture. That's not actually hers, it belongs to her sugar daddy. And it's chewing everything up. It chews up her expensive shoes. Okay, granted, puppies chew, and if you have any common sense around any kind of dog, it's probably best not to leave things that you care about where they can get to them. So Madison's all like, I hate this dog. I'm getting in trouble with my boyfriend because he's seeing on television the damage this dog is doing, because it's all in reality TV, remember? On one hand, you can be like, wow, Madison, you're so stuck up. You're such a snob. It's just a dog. But you gotta think, she's got a point. Have you ever had your stuff destroyed by an animal or by a kid or by someone else who just has no manners, no self-control? Discipline it. Take it to obedience school. Like, teach it some manners. But I guess we're just supposed to love this dog because Jane loves it. But it just doesn't do it for me, because just because I'm supposed to love Jane as the main character doesn't mean that I'm on board with everything that Jane does. I just find that filters through the entire book, where she has very little personality, and on the whole, because there are so many narrators, I feel like it prevents Conrad, or whoever actually wrote this book, from developing the plot. We don't get the plot development, and then we get a boring protagonist, and it's just like, what's the point of this book? Like, why am I going to care about a protagonist that does nothing, that nothing is happening to? I mean, there's supposed to be all this drama, but because we have so many different narrators, we stop focusing on certain aspects of the story. And that's going to get me into Scarlett. To me, Scarlett is part Whitney Port. I think the other part of Whitney Port is Jane's coworker, Hannah. If you know anything, again, about The Hills, there's Whitney Port, who got her own spinoff, The City. And when she started working on The City, she started dating, or at some point in time got involved with a member of crew. I'm guessing, same as with the book is the same as with life. Talent and crew are not supposed to be involved with each other. Scarlett gets involved with a member of the camera crew named Liam. And this is something that we see a little bit of in LA Candy, but in Sweet Little Lies, it's a full-blown relationship. Now, Scarlett is not known for relationships. She prides herself on not having relationships. This is a new thing for her. Obviously, the relationship is outed, which, spoiler, it's by Madison because she sees them making out at a party, which just wasn't smart on their part. So they have a little snag, a little snafu there because he thinks she leaked it and she's like, well, I didn't, and I don't think you did, so maybe it was so-and-so. But so they hit a little snag, but Scarlett is someone I could like. Scarlett in the first book, I liked her. I hated the fact that we're told how gorgeous she is. We're told how smart she is. We're told everything about her rather than getting to experience it and learn it about her. But then it's compounded here because we get it again. But she's less effective. I like her snark. I like that she stands up for herself. I love that she's not a dumb blonde. She's really intelligent. I hate the fact that she can speak so many languages. She's fluent. She reads French books for fun. She's smarter than her professors. Like, there's so much about her that I feel went overboard in trying to portray her as this intelligent character. In this book, all of those annoyances and shortcomings are heightened so that I don't enjoy her at all. I don't enjoy seeing her point of view because, for one, she's the character when she and Jane are first approached by Trevor to do this show. She's the one who's like, I'm not really into it, but she does it anyways. She quickly is like, this really is intrusive in my life, yet she never gives it a chance. And so I feel like that, again, is heightened in this book, where she is extremely difficult to work with. They kind of do what they can with her, and then she doesn't like the result, and all she does is complain. And then, of course, with Jane MIA, she is then forced to do a lot of scenes with the fourth member of their group named Gabby, and she can't stand Gabby because Gabby's an imbecile. I just wanted her to put some effort in and to try being good in front of the camera, to try helping this show get better rather than being cynical the entire time and not giving the editors much to work with, so that, yeah, they do then dumb her down. So the thing is, Jane doesn't want to believe anything about Madison, and then they are at a party of some sort, and in the first book, before they ever met Trevor and embarked on their reality TV journey, Jane and Scarlett met this guy named Diego, who they call D. He has noticed Madison hanging around, and he does some digging. He gets the proof. He shows it to Jane. That is when she moves out and back in with Scarlett. Our cliffhanger is her high school love shows back up. My problem kind of there is not that she would believe Diego over anybody else in her life, but that she has barely spoken to Scarlett in however long, yet because she has nowhere else to go, she's like, I'm just gonna go back to my apartment and wait for Scarlett to show up and everything's gonna be okay. It was really ridiculous because I'm just imagining her being in the living room, Scarlett is in her room, and then all of a sudden Scarlett is hearing this dog, and she's like, what in the world is the dog doing here? She leaves her room, and then Jane is, from my understanding, in the living room, sitting on the floor, watching TV, and she like pokes her head around the corner. It's like, hey, what's up? I'm here. And Scarlett's like, you're here. And then, you know, they kiss and make up. And I was like, okay, so if Scarlett were home when you got home, why didn't you knock on her door? Or maybe Jane had been in her room when Scarlett got home, and then she went to the living room to watch TV. That's how the dog got out. That's how the dog went to Scarlett's room, blah, 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 blah. But I was like, no, it doesn't really make sense. But I really hate the way that they reunite, because it lacks any kind of interest. It's just like Jane has made herself at home in a place that's not actually her home because she moved out. She has yet to talk to Scarlett. She has yet to make up with Scarlett. But she just assumes because they're childhood best friends that Scarlett would be like, yeah, sure, I'm great with you being here, even though you completely dismissed me and anything I was trying to do to help you. I couldn't buy it. And that's it. If you've seen any of my reviews, you know I hate when I can't buy something, when it doesn't make sense to me, when I don't think that it works. Huge issues there. Pet peeve, all right? When someone calls you sweetie, I feel like it's a very diminutive term. And so I wouldn't mind if Madison was the one calling people sweetie, or even if Jane had started out a very naive, lovable character, but then over the course of her time on the show, started picking up bad habits, maybe thinking more of herself, started then adopting certain phrases or mannerisms from Madison or people in the biz, and then started calling people sweetie. My thing is, if someone were like, oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry, or what's up, sweetie? Like, I'm just thinking it's very sarcastic, very cynical, not genuine. But so many characters use the term sweetie. Can we stop it already? It just lacks an air of genuineness, and it brings your characters down unless they're Madison or some other kind of fame digger out there. Or how she calls Diego D. And I guess it's because D is usually accompanied by an exclamation point. So it's like, D! If that was what came in your head every single time you read it, wouldn't that irritate you too? People love exclamation points. I used to love exclamation points, and then I went to a writing conference and they were like, don't use exclamation points. If you do, use it sparingly. And I was like, what? You're taking away my exclamation points? Exclamation point, exclamation point, no. You read a book like this and you understand why they say don't use exclamation points. Context can be its own exclamation point. You don't need to put it there for me to know they're excited about something. Shortening his name to D also rings as a form of intimacy. You have a close relationship with someone, but they barely ever speak to him. They barely ever see him. So I'm like, you don't have this close relationship with someone to shorten their name to a letter. I mean, I guess some people say, yeah, just call me D right off the bat. Maybe they do. But in this situation, it just doesn't fit with anything. And it bothered the crap out of me every single time I saw it. Ugh, let me get off that tangent, that rant. Hannah. I liked Hannah because she was someone from the very beginning that I was awfully suspicious of. Even though I felt like she was a Whitney Port character, and I always liked Whitney because she was not dramatic, which is why I would never be good on a reality show, because they were like, Beth, you're too boring. Like, have some drama in your life. Or I'm like, I respect my health. Stress will only bring me down. Hannah felt like she had a secret. And so from the very beginning of LA Candy, I was like, what's her secret? What's going on with her? She was in some ways a plant. Jane is working for an event planner. Hannah had been working for another event planner. She realized there was not going to be any upward movement. She runs into Trevor, and Trevor's like, I can get you in with this other event planner, and on top of that, I can get you on a television show. But what I want you to do is to talk up this certain character to the main character of our show. So that was her role, was to be like, be with Jesse, because he's the bad boy, Jane's the good girl. It makes for great television, even though she doesn't exactly agree with this. And so over the course of Sweet Little Lies, she's a little less supportive. she's acting a bit more suspicious. And so I'm thinking she's trying to sabotage Jane. Like, maybe she's actually involved with Jesse. Because what I love about the world that is set up is you don't know who to trust. And so I'm thinking that she isn't actually into event planning, but she's just someone who is placed in Jane's world, and she's really involved with Jesse, but because she's in Jane's world, she has to support Jane's relationship with Jesse. So now she's trying to tank Jane and Jesse, when in reality, she just could no longer live with the lie. So I liked Hannah. I'm not sure how I feel about the scene where Hannah reveals her duplicity. I like that Jane is so readily accepts it and forgives her, because I had enough of Jane being like, oh no, you're lying to me, even though they're not really lying. Like, I had enough of Jane's willingness to be duped, to not want to see the truth because it didn't fit into her nice, neat little box, because maybe it would, you know, throw her world out of order, which I think would actually have made the book better. But we're not going there. While I liked that Jane was willing to accept it and forgive her, because of her past behavior, I thought it was a little out of character for her to be like, yeah, okay, I'll buy it. I'll buy that you didn't mean to lie to me this entire time, to pretend, because she goes, oh, so basically you just wanted to be on a show. And Hannah's like, no, and, you know, here's my reasonings and my rationale. And then Jane's like, okay. In terms of stringing me along, Hannah was the best about it. Although there is a little bit of a storyline with Madison that was begun at the end of LA Candy, in which she's being blackmailed. She's getting these mysterious letters, mysterious texts, mysterious emails. The same person is also emailing Veronica at the Gossip magazine. And so we're like, what does all of this mean? Who is Madison? Because we're already learning she's not the rich little girl that we all thought she was, but all these houses and great things she has are actually courtesy of her rich married boyfriends. Okay, layer to the cake. You don't get any resolution to that in this book, which I'm semi-okay with, except for the fact nothing happens in this book, so we needed something to happen, and that did not happen. I want to talk finally about Jane and Jesse, because I don't think I did this well enough in my first review, in my review of LA Candy. They never officialized their relationship. It seemed to me that they were dating, they were seriously dating, but at the point where the problems start and then she ends up doing what she does with Brayden, I don't even feel like they're actually together. Yet all of a sudden in this book, the problem is she cheated on her boyfriend. And I'm like, one, I never got the sense that he was your boyfriend. I got the sense that it was leading there, but that was never how you referred to him. He was just the guy that you were seriously dating, which maybe that is synonymous with boyfriend to a 19-year-old. I feel like that was a plot hole. That was a leap that was made but never actually established. But because we needed that in the next book, yes, they were together. And then the whole hooking up thing with Brayden, I guess having sexy pictures taken of you with another guy who's not your boyfriend could be devastating to a girl with a good girl image, with a reputation that does not want to be sullied. She claims they didn't sleep together. I feel like this whole hooking up term is so ambiguous. So I'm like, what kind of hooking up did you and Brayden do? And then what kind of hooking up were you and Jesse doing? And then we get to this book and you're so serious about him when it really wasn't that serious of a relationship in the first book. In this book, Jesse is abusive. He is verbally, emotionally, and sometimes physically abusive. And I don't think it was handled properly. There was so much glossed over, and I guess because of the time period in which this was written, those were not subjects that were giving a whole lot of light. Or maybe it's because this book is supposed to be more lighthearted for YA, that the powers that be did not want to drag it down with such a serious storyline. And I'm assuming the only reason this was even included was because it was Lauren Conrad's life experience with her own boyfriend. But if you're gonna include it for whatever reason, you need to do it justice. You need to do it properly. And all we get is, we're assuming that at the beginning of this book, Jesse has seen the error of his ways. Because at the end of the last book, what led me to believe they weren't actually together was the fact that at his birthday, he was doing things he shouldn't do. He was mistreating Jane. He was not messing around with other girls, but he was giving other girls attention. And this upsets Jane to the point where she stops talking to him. And in my opinion, essentially breaks up with him. She may have actually gone through the process of being like, we're over. But this book is kind of like he sees that his behavior was wrong, and it was wrong because he was under the influence of something. And so he's starting out with club soda or ginger ale or whatever. And so this is what's making her think, okay, I can get back into it. And then he quickly devolves into a drunk who's doing whatever else. But we only see this because we're getting midnight phone calls to come pick him up. And then all of a sudden, you know, he's kind of pushing her around or this or that, and she's finally had enough and she breaks it off with him. And I'm like, you had so much opportunity to really give this book some substance, to shed some light on something, to make Jane stand up for herself. Instead, she's so weak, and that could be a reality too. Maybe that was Lauren Conrad's reality. I'm sure there's a lot of abused women out there who can't get out of their relationships for one reason or another. So I'm not trying to put the fact that Jane couldn't stand up for herself and break up with Jesse down. Like, I'm not trying to negate the difficulties of this. But for the purposes of this book and needing things to happen and having a protagonist who does nothing and continues to ignore signs, it continues to ignore truths, not just with Jesse, but with Madison and Scarlett and everything. It's just one more way that I'm like, why are Jane and Jesse together? Why doesn't she stand up for herself? Why doesn't she take matters into her own hands and do something? I was really bothered by the Jane Jesse thing because it just beating a dead horse. Why are they together? Why are they together? We get nothing from him, of him, about him. So why is he an entity? Why is he part of this book's equation? I could go on and on and on, but I've gone on enough. So there we go. That is Sweet Little Lies. I have started the next book, and holy cow, is it not that great. But we'll see how it ends up. I hope you like this review. Please like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff that says you're there for me, because I'm here for you. I would love book suggestions. Let me know in the comments, and I will see you later. Bye.